Thank you, Ian. Thank you, the Heritage Council, for inviting me to speak here today. It's a privilege to be able to share the Kilmallock story with a wider audience, and it's been a privilege to work especially with the Irish Wall Towns Network through the last 10 years. The Historic Towns Initiative was a huge boon to Kilmallock because it completed a project that we would have found difficult to fund otherwise. And we have created a whole new space for the town as a result, and it's been great. And so I have to take you back 10 years really to explain the entirety of the project. Kilmallock itself is a small town in southeast Limerick. It's close to the Cork border, and it has a population of slightly less than 2,000. It didn't do that well in the boom period, which possibly is to its credit. But it has a very high vacancy rate. We have done those surveys, and I have to tell you we're well over the 20%, so it's quite frightening. It did have a very good urban renewal in the 2000s, guided by a Shaftesbury plan, and which actually really improved the quality of the public realm in the town, created a non-intrusive good car parking space off the street, and undergrounded all of the wirescape. So the actual fabric and public realm of the town was hugely improved at that point. But unfortunately, there was no major industry and there was no kind of take-up of the town. It's poorly served by public transport as well, which hasn't helped it, and it's off the main road. In the medieval times, that's a hugely different picture, because at that point, Kilmallock was actually on the main road between the two major medieval cities of Cork and Limerick, and was a very important merchant town, and reached its zenith really in about the late 16th century, early 17th century. And I'm afraid it's all been downhill since then, particularly at the end of the 18th century, when the main road was between the two cities was moved over to where it is now on the N20 to Charleville, which is about 8 miles to the west of Kilmallock. So it has, that helped it in that it saved an awful lot of the heritage fabric of the town. So there would have been a circuit of 1,700 metres of town wall, of which about 1,200 metres on the sides, on the two long sides, let's say, is still stands. So we're incredibly lucky. So, as I said, it was a 10-year project. It was largely helped and got underway for the first of those, 8 of those, 10 of those years by the Irish Wall Towns Network. And then laterally by the REDS project, and then finally by the Historic Towns Initiative. We were always aware of the importance of the wall in Kilmallock, but unfortunately it's not very visible when you drive down through the main street, and the areas beside it were held to private property. There was a Ducas, you can see that I love this is the back of the property, so front out onto the main street, and this is the wall as it was in 1999, unloved, really. So 2005 was the turning point for us. We were founder members of the Irish Wall Towns Network, and the first thing that came out of it, as Alison pointed out, was the public realm plan and our conservation and management plan for the town walls. And this also feeds into the Historic Towns Initiative, because we have had a lot of plans and strategies in place in order to make our application. Particularly the public realm plan was very well received, both by the community, who have bought into it and are very supportive of it, and it also then fed directly into our local area plan. And our local area plan is very heritage orientated. Through the Wall Towns Network, actually the total length should be 399 there, we have managed to conserve about 243 metres of the west wall. There was another project on the east in 2010. But you can see the impact that the Irish Wall Towns Network has had on Kilmallock. Our local area plan then, I'll just rush through these, but you can see that it's all in regard to implementing the proposals of the conservation management plan, the public ground plan, that should actually read the west wall walkway. There's no, you can edit until you're blue in the face, but a mistake will always creep through. So, and very much proactive in regard to the walls and the walkway. So, I'm just going to run you through some of the projects, the work to the wall. With the Irish Wall Towns Network funding, it was all, because the funding was limited and a lot of towns were requiring it, it was on a structural basis, so it concentrated all the time on parts of the wall that were under threat, and so that they could be consolidated at the time. So you can see we had some falls, and they were repaired, unfortunately. So you can see this was the worst section of collapse. Basically, the lowest level of the wall had failed, and the entire outer face had fallen. But it was great because it meant everything was left in situ, and it was there ultimately to consolidate and then under Reds to rebuild. So, and these are the inside. The inside of the town wall is not generally as well preserved as the outside. It tends to be defaced generally. So it gets a less pretty picture in the end. But we had trees growing out of it, holes in it all the way through. Then the Reds, government initiative of Reds came through, and we were actually twinned with our arch enemies, Charleville, down the road, which was good in a way, because we did work together quite well, and particularly on the kind of tourism point of view. So that enabled us to do some of our early strategies for the walkway, which was part of our initiative, and that was to do the non-invasive surveys along the outside of the west wall, and to do a preliminary design for the walkway, which had been a long-held ambition of both the council. And so added to that, then we continued with two more projects funded by the Irish Wall Towns Network. But all of this is out in an area that was held in private ownership, and so it was not publicly accessible. So even when the Conservation and Management Plan was done, there was a lot of public interaction, and while people were generally supportive to the walls, they were totally unaware of them. The gardens in Kilmallock are quite long, and through fear of damaging them and just not wanting to know about them, a lot of the gardens have been let totally overgrow toward the end of the garden. And in fact, one of our first initiatives, but way back in 2008, all of the householders have always allowed us unlimited access, and we went in at that stage and we cut away all of the heavy growth off the walls, and they also allowed us to take down any large trees that were in proximity to the walls. So that was a start of a sort of a clear fell along the inner line. Again, another this was the one piece that's sort of in private ownership inside and out, and it's about 50 length, coming up towards Emmett Street at the end of the run towards Blossom Gate. And again, a very high piece of wall, 4 metres, and practically coming down on a lady's back garden. So that was again another dangerous area. So then, late in 2016, although it was the 2016 project, it was announced only in November, we got a wonderful grant towards putting in the walkway. And so that was commenced in 2017. And under the Reds project, and we tried to keep we've tried to keep it simple, and it goes through altogether 3.5 acres, which will be sort of green field, and we intend to monitor how it's being used and how the biodiversity there is being managed and responded to by use. So it's not a static, it's a watching brief of how we'll manage it. So the other great thing about Reds was that we went back, and while we had consolidated the wall in areas where it had fallen under the Irish Wall Towns Network, in Reds, because we were now going to open the area and have a pathway, we were, with the permission of the department, we were allowed to raise the walls where they were still low. So the wall is up to a minimum of 2.5 metres the whole way along the outside, which is enough to protect any of the householders when the area became public. So that was quite a large proportion of the REDS project, as well as the pathway. So you can see this area is quite broken down, and again, we didn't go heavy-handed on it, we just sort of really brought it up there. Small little pieces like there, and another bit here. Again, this is the earlier consolidation from the Irish Wall Towns network, and I never understand how that pillar stayed standing when all about it fell down, but there it was. There's the original piece of the wall, and there is another piece of raising through the REDS project. This area we left as it had been consolidated, because that area actually corresponds to the back garden of a property owned by the local authority, which is immediately beside what we're calling the Merchant's House, which is a 16th century building fronting out onto the street, which we hope ultimately will become a whole interpretive centre and medieval garden. And so there is possibility to actually access through the wall, because there are no openings in the whole length of it. Again, some more just raising, but using the stone that was there, which is great. It also included land transfers, and another thing, everything has a dynamic and everything sort of builds towards a project, but in 2011 the supermarket at this end of the town came in for planning permission, and while we worked through a lot of issues, they had a lot of heritage issues on the site. They had a standing 16th century building within the fabric of the existing supermarket, and they wanted to build on the other side of it. They had a lot of archaeology to do. That same supermarket in the 80s had caused the only breach in the wall on a bank holiday weekend. In the late 80s, the then owners of it had knocked the town wall at the time. Current owners were totally exonerated from that. They had nothing to do with it, and they worked very well with us. And part of the whole planning process was that this area, which they owned as part of the supermarket, was actually came into local authority ownership in an arrangement. And then we also had to buy another piece of land from a landowner here, a farm, part of a farm holding. And then we did an exchange here with the school. So this is the Glenfield Road up here, and basically the walkway runs from there, and there's also an entrance then in from the church all the way down to, this is Super Value car park here. And with the development of Super Value and the increased space of car park in the back of Super Value, it has also changed the dynamic. A lot of people who come to Super Value are actually approaching now from the back rather than trying to park in the main street. And so that's actually become quite a vibrant place, which has fed into the whole project of the walkway. And so there's just some views of it as it's partially finished. So anyway, we come to the Historic Towns Initiative, which was incredibly important for us, because having got all this money, which we were very grateful for, and we put our own money towards it as well, there was still a considerable length of town wall that had not been consolidated. It wasn't in immediate danger, but it was, you know yourself that it would a lot of missing pointing. It needed flaunching on the top. It needed vegetation cleaned off it, and it just generally needed to be presented in a good manner to have the best effect when the walkway opened. And that's why the Historic Towns Initiative was an incredible boon for us, because we would never have found that amount of money anywhere, and it'd been hard to justify spending that amount. So we had a whole series of sections, including this incredibly long section here, which was wonderful. And most of that wall along that section, I have to tell you, is over 4 meters high on the outside. and it also has, you can see the town ditch as well beside it. It's partially filled in, but you can very much see it. And it's just a beautiful thing to see. And a lot then on the inside from all this section here is actually in the public domain too, because we have this is where the car park is off-site, and there's a children's playground and a small housing estate here. So all of that from here all the way through to here is in the public domain. And then this is an area where this is a little avenue up here that it can be accessed as well. So, and then we get into private landowners down here on the interior. We were finally able to do a digital survey for the entire length of the wall, inside and out, which I'm so sorry we didn't do right at the start of the project, but it's been wonderful, and it's been a great help. The other element, which is separated just by the house and onto Emmett Street, is Blossom Gate, which is a still functioning 15th century gate. And we did work, as part of the initiative, we did work on the roof of that to waterproof it. It had started to leak. And again, as part of the initiative, we're very lucky in Kilmallock because we have a sea scheme there that's run by Kilmallock Tourism Development Limited, and they have become strategic partners with the local authority, and we work very well together. And they have taken over the maintenance of the wall, so they will be constantly cutting on the outside of the wall. They will be maintaining the pathway, they will keep ivy off the wall, they will inspect with myself the interior of the wall on a regular basis, so that they'll be monitored. So we were able to run this 2-day lime workshop in the height of the heat. Remember that summer, that all so long ago. I've never seen lime dry faster. And we also were able to involve the local RSS schemes as well, who do very good work for Limerick County Council in the county graveyards, repairing boundary walls and the like. So that was another thing. And then the work got underway at the end of the summer, and sort of just on the various sections, so inside and out. We had an official opening of the pathway on October the 12th, but we obviously had to close it up again because we were still working on the wall. But it's been wonderful, and it's been wonderful to see the fact that there's huge amounts of parapet wall surviving, particularly at the north end of town. So it's been great, and the view as well that's the view from Super Value here on the south, and that's the view back towards the Super Value car park. Tours from the National School as well. And the other element that we worked on was there were sheds you saw in the early picture up against the wall, and they were taken down, but they also had a concrete apron beside them. And I thank my colleague that's here, Tom Joyce, who prepared the drawings for the application. Again, to increase the public realm aspect of the walkway, we wanted to make this amenity space where we could, it's within sight of Super Value, so families coming to the car park will be able to go down and have a picnic, have the kids play on the space, sit down, read a book. We're also intending on putting in a gaming space. And it's to look back at how the area where the walkway has been used in the past. You can see the quotes there. This whole area was 18 gardens that were used by people who lived inside the wall. And so there must have been a lot of communality going on out there as they went out to, dig their spuds or whatever they were doing. It's to return it to that aspect. And you can see then the lake that was still there by the mid-19th century, but is now a wooded area. So we resurfaced it, and ultimately we're going to put planters are being made as I speak, and the seat, and we're going to put in sort of like chess and medieval game, Nine Man's Morris or Neff Taffel or something like that. And ultimately we'd like to surface this with some just flat games for kids. And the other thing is, there's our walkway. We're also working on an east walkway. It's semi-completed at this stage. We have another walkway here and another river walkway that was put in a long time ago, and if we join all those with our pieces on the street, we have nearly 5 kilometres now of walkway around Kilmallock. The HTI has been wonderful in that respect, and this is the view of the pathway. I just love this picture. It was taken sort of in the summer, and there's the pathway and works to the wall going on, and there's the Super Valley car parking back. So I would like just to say that without the HDI, there is no way that it would have been finished to the quality and standard that it has been. And it's been great. So thank you very much.